Hi, everyone, this is the Encyclopedia channel. This program will explain a brief history of humanity for you. The author of this book is the Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari. In this book, he pointed out that the deepest and most fundamental driving force behind the splendid civilization created by human beings from ancient times to today lies in the use of imagination. A cognitive revolution driven by so. Why did Harari put forward such a point of view? How did people in ancient times be more developed than people in the early agricultural society? What is the essence of human progress and development? Find out after watching this video. A brief history of mankind, as the name suggests, is a history told centered on the human species. The writing method of this book is also different from most works. It is not based on clues such as the history of biology and the process of human history, but to write the history of civilization around the human species. To put it bluntly, it will tell you that human beings what it does is because of who it is. Perhaps, you will think that this is a materialistic perspective. The civilizations created by human beings are all about what kind of species human beings are. But this book tells that the most prominent and amazing feature of the human species is that it has evolved a set of mechanisms that can guarantee the realization of a great power in a biological sense. This great power is imagination. All the achievements and civilizations that human beings can achieve are due to our imagination. A brief history of mankind, the author of this book, Yuval Harari, is an Israeli historian, born in 1976, who received a doctorate in history from Oxford University, and later studied at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, served as a professor of history. The academic circles have a generally accepted evaluation of him, young geeks, and the main reason why he received this evaluation is his two books, A Brief History of Mankind and A Brief History of the Future, as well as the proposals surrounding these two books. A series of shocking views. For example, in A Brief History of Mankind, Harari believes that compared with other higher animals, such as chimpanzees, humans actually do not have much individual advantage. The biggest reason why human beings can achieve such great achievements is the ability to cooperate in groups. The reason why humans are good at group cooperation is because people have imagination. Other animals only live in objective reality, but humans can live in the dual reality of objective reality and virtual reality at the same time, which is the real reason why humans can rule the earth. The ideas in A Brief History of Mankind have shocked many historians, but Harari didn't stop there. In A Brief History of the Future, he further put forward more subversive views, such as our species has begun to face such a choice: should we become gods? Should we make ourselves immortal? If artificial intelligence robots will eventually surpass humans, should we hand over the power to manage life and society to robots, and then just pursue happiness? Unlike many historians who focus on the past and piles of old papers, Harari focuses on the present. He believes that human beings have now entered the stage where these questions must be answered, and his job is to draw knowledge and wisdom, experience and lessons from history to answer these questions. The book A Brief History of Humanity is divided into 4 parts and 20 chapters. The first part explains the cognitive revolution, the second part explains the agricultural revolution, the third part is the fusion and unification of human beings, and the fourth part is the scientific revolution. From this catalog, you can see that the most important clue for Harari to observe human history is revolution, and it is a revolution in the broadest sense, which means everything from cognition to technological production to social organization, the most fundamental changes and updates. If you can remember this clue, you can better understand the purpose and significance of the book A Brief History of Mankind. Next, let's explain the fundamental point of view that Harari wants to convey, why it is said that behind the continuous self-innovation of human beings and the continuous advancement of history is the unique imagination of the human species. Part 1, The Cognitive Revolution. First of all, Harari wants to tell us that the human species is actually nothing special. From the perspective of physical chemistry, it is nothing more than the combination of atoms and molecules. From the perspective of biological classification, it is nothing more than a family of primate mammals, called hominids. In fact, higher animals like chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans are very close to us in a biological sense. As the book says, 6 million years ago, a female ape gave birth to 2 children, one became the grandpa of all chimpanzees, and the other became the grandma of all humans. Moreover, even if we discuss the species within the human family, the species that humans belong to today are not much biologically different from other ancient species in history. Remember the classification of species when studying biology? There are phylum, order, family, genus and species, and today's human beings belong to the Homo sapiens species under the genus Homo, and are the only species under this family and genus. But in history, there have actually been other human species, such as the Neanderthals in the Middle East and Europe, such as the Denisovans in Oceania. However, archaeological and genetic studies have proved that a small part of these races other than Homo sapiens interbreed with our ancestors, and a little bit of their genes remain in some peoples today, but the vast majority of ancient humans lived between 70,000 and they were wiped out by our ancestors 30,000 years ago, or at least their living space was squeezed and extinct by our ancestors, just like the dodo was hunted and extinct. Of course, the replacement of species in nature and the survival of the fittest are normal. But why can Homo sapiens defeat other ancient races and win? You know, our ancestors are not as good as other races in size, mobility, and agility. Harari tells us that the fundamental answer lies in our ancestors possessing a more developed ability, which is language ability. He introduced a very vivid and interesting theory, gossip theory. What does that mean? Biologists believe that animals such as Homo sapiens can make a lot of sounds, which can be combined into many sentences and develop complex meanings. But in fact, this kind of ability is not uncommon in other animals. For example, monkeys also have different calls. They can use a special call to express that there is a lion by the river, everyone, don't drink water. This kind of call can also convey information. Is Homo sapiens any different from them? There is a difference. Homo sapiens is an animal whose brain and language can express its own ideas about Homo sapiens, that is, it can gossip about its own people. This ability is amazing. If people in a tribe can gossip about members of their own tribe for a few hours a day, then they can clearly know who is more trustworthy and reliable in their tribe, and in the long run, everyone can be closer with continuous cooperation. The tribe will grow rapidly in size. This gossip theory sounds strange, but it has been confirmed by many studies and experiments. Harari believes that it is the key to our understanding of the progress and development of human civilization. If you think about it carefully, information such as there is a lion by the river still describes real objects, but who is good and who is bad in a tribe, who is trustworthy and who has moral problems, describes virtual objects such as good, bad, trust, moral, and so on. And if a species can talk about virtual objects, it has the possibility of division of labor and cooperation to form a complex society. To illustrate this point, Harari further cited a classic sociological research result, that is Dunbar's number, also known as the law of 150. According to this law, if a group is only maintained by gossip communication between individuals, then the maximum size of the group is 150 people. As long as it is within this scope, you don't need to have any institutional norms, and you can maintain normal operations just by relying on interpersonal relationships, such as a small company, a small village, and so on. But if an organization wants to exceed the threshold of 150 people, it must have a prerequisite, that is, everyone can imagine and believe a fictional story. For example, in Catholicism, everyone believes in the crucifixion of Jesus, so believers who do not know each other also have common topics. The same goes for a company, a society, or a country. What is the basis of this ability? It is just introduced, the ability to describe virtual objects. This is the first crucial revolution that Harari talked about, the cognitive revolution. The so-called cognitive revolution means that animals like Homo sapiens have a developed language ability, which exceeds the level of expression of ordinary animals. A lion by the river, and it can gossip about itself. And with the ability to gossip, Homo sapiens developed the ability to describe virtual objects. With the ability to describe virtual objects, our ancestors could jointly believe in one thing, which made it possible for them to cross the threshold of 150 people, form a complex society, and develop a high degree of civilization. Harari pointed out that this is a huge breakthrough even from the perspective of biological evolution. Because the evolution of species in the past was ultimately based on genetic mutations, for example, monkeys turned into orangutans, and orangutans turned into humans. What's wrong with this evolutionary approach? It's too long. How long do you think it took for the genetic evolution from apes to humans? For 2 million years, the lifestyle of the middle ape man has not changed substantially. However, it has only been 70,000 years since the emergence of Homo sapiens, and the way of life of human beings has undergone earth-shaking changes. In the final analysis, it is because this species no longer relies on genetic mutations to move forward, but relies on division of labor and cooperation. You may be surprised by this conclusion. After all, Darwin's evolutionary theory of species evolution and survival of the fittest is too famous, and the discovery of genes is one of the biggest scientific breakthroughs in the 20th century. Now tell us that biological evolution does not depend on genes, but on division of labor and cooperation? Is there any evidence? Part 2, the Agricultural Revolution. Harari said that there really is, and this evidence is the second revolution he wants to talk about, that is, the agricultural revolution. Before humans entered the agricultural age, the so-called gathering age, you can imagine. In this era, men hunt and women pick fruit. There is no slash-and-burn farming, and productivity is extremely backward. Then you might think that people in this era must be living miserable lives, often hungry, and not as smart as the humans who later entered the agricultural society, right? But Harari says you're just wrong. Archaeologists have proved that ordinary people living in the harvesting era had much better nutritional status than ordinary people who had just entered the agricultural society later, and even their brain volume was larger than that of ordinary people who later entered the agricultural society. In other words, from the point of view of evolution, human species degenerates from the collection era to the agricultural society. Why is this so? Let's first explain why people in the collection era had more developed bodies and brains than those in the early agricultural society. They are in good health. The reason is that people in the foraging era ate a variety of foods with balanced nutrition. They had mushrooms in the morning, fruits at noon, and rabbits at night. On the contrary, the diet structure of ancient people who entered the agricultural society was relatively simple most of the time. For example, farmers in ancient China basically had dry food for 3 meals a day, and they couldn't encounter pests and diseases, or excessive taxes, otherwise they would suffer from malnutrition. Scientists have also confirmed that the brain capacity of people in the gathering era is also larger than that of people in agricultural societies. This is because the natural environment that the gatherers have to face is very complicated. He must be familiar with animals and plants, and know what can be eaten and what cannot be eaten. He is keenly aware of the surrounding environment. If there is a rustle in the grass, there may be a snake, and he will die if he steps on it. He must be good at sports. All this requires his brain to process very complex information. On the contrary, many people in an agricultural society live in a small area all their lives, plant a small wheat field, live a simple and boring life, and have a narrow range of activities. The information processed by their brains is actually less and less. Since the individual human beings are actually degenerating from the collection era to the agricultural society, why do human beings continue to evolve in this direction? The answer is that agricultural societies greatly increased the likelihood that Homo sapiens would reproduce. Because in the gathering era, people had to move around, and they went wherever there was prey. And children become a big trouble when relocating. But once entering the agricultural society, human beings become sedentary animals, and they can have children every year, and the population growth rate soars all of a sudden. Despite high infant mortality, malnutrition, and smaller brain sizes in agricultural societies, the total population did rise. This involves a fundamental value issue. From a biological point of view, the criterion for evaluating evolution is not how strong and how fast an individual is, but how many genes of this species have been transmitted. Harari made an analogy. It's like judging whether a company is doing well today mainly depends on how much money it makes, not whether its employees are happy. Entering the agricultural society, everyone's physical fitness has declined, but the transmission efficiency of the group's genes has been greatly improved. This is the true meaning of evolution. So Harari said that the agricultural revolution seems to be an improvement, but for individual human beings, it is actually a huge trap. The agricultural revolution looks like humans successfully domesticated certain crops and livestock. In fact, it can be said that these crops and livestock domesticated humans. They force humans to serve their growth every day, plowing the fields, loosen the soil, water and fertilize, and take good care of it. Moreover, the development of agriculture has enabled human beings to create societies, countries, classes and religions, thus resulting in class oppression and religious wars. Human beings as a whole have indeed made rapid progress through the division of labor and cooperation, but the suffering of each individual has increased. If you don't believe me, look at ancient civilizations. There are pyramids in Egypt, the Colosseum in Rome, and the Great Wall in China. Aren't these majestic wonders of the world all achieved by the enslavement and oppression of ordinary people by pharaohs and emperors? To put it bluntly, the agricultural revolution exchanged the miserable situation of most people for a small number of people to become the supreme ruling class, and enslaved most people to create civilization. This involves what Harari said, the second leap of human imagination brought about by the agricultural revolution. We have already talked about the first leap, which is the so-called cognitive revolution. Human beings have developed the ability to imagine virtual things through gossip, so they can also surpass the 150 people threshold of tribal groups. So what is the second leap? It means that human beings can construct a virtual political order through imagination. Just like the reason why the ancient Egyptians obeyed the pharaoh's order to build the pyramids was not only because they were afraid of the pharaoh's authority, but also because they sincerely believed that the pharaoh was the spokesperson of the gods in the world, and building the pyramids for the pharaoh was a part of obeying the divine order. Harari said that the social order we live in is actually derived from imagination in the final analysis. This theory has three important manifestations. First, the order constructed by imagination is closely integrated with the real world, so it is difficult to discover. For example, if a child lives in a medieval castle, he does not have his own room, and his every move is exposed to the eyes of others, so he is particularly concerned about his social status and sense of honor. But in modern society, children have their own room, so he will cultivate a belief in individualism. He feels that it is good to live out his own value without caring about other people's eyes. This kind of values and beliefs are actually closely bound up with people's arrangements for their own living environment. It is difficult for you to say who caused who. Second, the imaginary order shapes people's desires. For example, many people today want to travel abroad and buy a big villa. You think that doing these things is a manifestation of free personality, but in fact it is instilled in you by consumerism. The movies, TV, and advertisements you see every day tell you this. How about in ancient times? It's all very funny, and it's all imaginary instilled in you. Third, the imaginary order connects people together. For example, why is the dollar paper worth money? In the final analysis, it is also because of imagination. But it is precisely the existence of this kind of imagination that enables us to establish a transnational economy, establish international trade rules, and allow the exchange of capital, goods, and labor around the world. Without this, human beings may regress back to their original state in an instant. So in the end, Harari concluded that, as human beings, it is impossible for us to break away from the order established by imagination. Every time we thought we had broken through the prison walls and marched toward freedom, we were actually just going to another bigger prison with a slightly wider range of activities. Throughout history, when human beings imagine order, they are particularly good at imagining the difference between high and low, such as the comparison between whites and blacks, and the comparison between men and women, and countless arguments have been given. In fact, these arguments have nothing to do with justice, they are mere derivatives of the imagination. You may ask, since all orders are imagined, theoretically speaking, different people should imagine very different orders. For example, Westerners imagine that God created all things, and Chinese imagine that Pangu created the world, and this is indeed the case in ancient society. But how should we explain the era of globalization we are facing today? Is it because all of humanity happens to be imagined together? Part 3, The Fusion and Unity of Humanity. Harari believes that starting from 1000 BC, there have been three orders that may really allow all human beings to just imagine together, making people believe that compatriots around the world may be together and governed by the same set of rules. The three orders are money order, empire order, and belief order. Let's talk about the money order first. Why does money have such a magical power? Harari said that because the money system has two major characteristics: everything can be exchanged, everyone believes in it, and the former depends on the latter in the final analysis. You might say that money is essentially a general equivalent, but Harari will tell you that this understanding is not essential enough. The nature of money is that it is the most pervasive and effective mutual trust system ever created. The biggest difference between it and religion is that only oneself believes in religion, but everyone believes in money. You believe it can be exchanged for material wealth, and so do I. Even if we don't know each other and don't know each other's character, but just relying on this kind of trust, that is, you pay, we can cooperate. The second order is the imperial order, which, to put it bluntly, is an order of violence. This is easy to understand. Everyone understands the logic of money, and everyone understands the logic of swords. However, empires don't just rely on violence to rule. It simultaneously propagates a unified law, script, language and currency, and even a common culture. Moreover, the elites of most empires themselves believe that they are working for the overall interests of all the empire's people. Harari specifically mentioned China. In ancient times, China believed that it should spread Chinese culture widely. The so-called mandate of heaven is not to exploit the whole world, but to educate all peoples. It is precisely because of this belief that no matter how fragmented China is in history, it will be unified. In the 21st century, Harari believes that a new global empire concept is emerging, which may further break the boundaries of the past nation-states, bring people from all over the world under its banner, and solve some common problems, such as environmental protection and development issues, etc. The third order is the religious order, or the order of belief. In fact, belief in this kind of thing has begun since ancient times. As we said before, our ancestors Homo sapiens have the ability to imagine virtual things, and they will naturally use this ability to imagine things that do not exist in the real world, such as ghosts and gods, such as God, and thus polytheism, monotheism, different types of religion like nature worship or ancestor worship. But what Harari wants to point out is that, in fact, many ideas and values in modern society are essentially beliefs. For example, humanism in early modern Europe actually worshipped and sanctified human nature. Harari said that modern society is against torture, that is, to give so-called humanitarian care to criminals. In fact, it is impossible to argue whether it is good or bad, but we believe that only in this way can human dignity be maintained, so we do it. The same is true of social humanism. They believe that equality is the most important value, so they object to the privilege of the rich, because it means that money is more important than humanity. In the same way, the values and admiration of human rights, freedom, etc. in modern society are essentially part of the order of belief. At this point, you may have doubts again. According to Harari's explanation, are all the achievements of human civilization imagined? Don't these high-rise buildings, smart computers, and satellite rockets we build have any real foundation? Harari's answer is, it cannot be said that there is no such thing at all. And that brings us to the last part, scientific revolutions. Part 4, the scientific revolution. Science is essentially a system of knowledge. But why is this knowledge system able to create huge productivity and destructive power, detonate the atomic bomb, and send humans to the moon? Harari said that this is because the scientific body of knowledge differs from all previous knowledge systems in three major ways. The first is the willingness to admit one's ignorance. Harari said a very classic sentence: the scientific revolution is not a revolution of knowledge, but a revolution of ignorance. If you don't believe me, think about it. In the old days, whether it was Christianity, Buddhism or Confucianism, they all assumed that all important things in this world were already included in classics such as the Bible, Buddhist scriptures, and the 4 books and 5 classics. Issues not mentioned in the classics are unimportant. For example, how to build a ship is not mentioned in the 4 books and 5 classics. Then building a ship must be unimportant. If you want to understand the world, you don't need to do anything else, just read these classics thoroughly. Modern science, on the contrary, first admits that it knows nothing about important issues, so it encourages confrontation and collision of views. The second is centered on observation and mathematics. This is also a major difference between modern science and past knowledge systems. Harari gave an example. For example, there is a religion called Manichaeism. Manichaeism believes that everything in this world is the struggle between good and evil. Evil creates matter, and good creates spirit. In fact, if you think about it, this kind of religion can basically be said to be omnipotent, and it can explain everything. For example, my computer is broken. Why is it broken? Because evil has affected my computer. I got a kind programmer to help me fix my computer, good over evil. The question is, does it tell you how to fix your computer? Absolutely not. So while it could explain everything, it doesn't make any sense. Modern science centers on observation and mathematics. The so-called observation is actually verification. You said that your computer is broken because of evil. Can you verify it? If you can't verify it, you can only fall into a circular argument. But I said that the reason why the computer is broken is because the main board is burned, and it will be fine to replace the main board. This is a knowledge that can be verified. Of course, modern science can continue to use mathematical tools to calculate the extent to which the current will burn the motherboard, so as to establish general laws and theories about computer damage. The third is to use existing theories to acquire new abilities. This is also easy to explain. The innovations in ancient society were basically random innovations, that is, during the labor process, occasionally a craftsman discovered that the improvement of this tool was more efficient, and then it was recorded as a set of oral experience. But modern science can start from existing theories, summarize the laws, and point out the direction of innovation for us, instead of relying on the flashes of craftsmen. But the scientific revolution has also brought people a new way of imagination. That is, everyone believes that science and technology can continue to improve, and human society can continue to develop. In fact, this belief has become the cornerstone of the functioning of human society. Why do you say that? You see, in 2016, the United States already had a debt of $22.8 trillion US. To put it bluntly, it is borrowing money for development. But why do you still believe that the United States has the ability to pay back the money and will not go bankrupt? The reason is that you believe that the technology and economic strength of the United States will continue to advance, and as long as it can maintain growth in the future, it can continue to play this debt game. This is also the essence of all modern states and modern finance. However, Harari also pointed out that the scientific revolution, like all revolutions in history, is itself a product of continuous leaps in human imagination and will bring huge material benefits. However, this leap is not necessarily a good thing for a single human being. First of all, European countries took advantage of their technological advantages to expand rapidly, which brought serious disasters to the whole world. It is conservatively estimated that in the more than 20 years from 1885 to 1908, 6 million people in Congo died under colonial rule. Secondly, the rapid development of science and technology has caused a rapid increase in the gap between the rich and the poor around the world, and it is becoming more and more difficult for backward countries to catch up with advanced countries. According to estimates, laborers in Africa and Indonesia today earn less food than they did 500 years ago. So, global economic growth may also be a huge trap. It actually makes more people live in hunger and poverty. It can be seen that A Brief History of Humanity surveys the history of the world from the perspective of species research and outlines the essence of human progress and development. To put it bluntly, our species is a species that lives in imagination and reality at the same time. This ability to live in dual reality has allowed us to achieve great achievements, but it has also led most of us to fall into a more miserable situation. The situation, from the peasants who were oppressed by theocracy and royal power in ancient times, to the laborers exploited by capitalism and consumerism, is all the same. Each round of revolutions and leaps does not fundamentally change this model, but instead pushes the advantages and disadvantages of this model to a more extreme level. The more developed the human imagination, the more severe the suffering each individual faces. Harari came to this conclusion not to scare people or to gain fame. He is not interested in arousing your approval by means of stimulating your anxiety. His purpose is to look forward to the future for all mankind. Why do you say that? Because today's scientific and technological progress has reached such a point, it is possible for human beings to cross the boundaries of biology, use technological means to transform themselves, and complete the next step of evolution. In other words, the way of species evolution has progressed from genetic evolution to division of labor evolution in the past, and may continue to progress from division of labor evolution to technological evolution in the future. From a conventional point of view, this doesn't seem like such a bad thing. But now that you understand a brief history of humanity, you will know that there are deeper crises and changes hidden behind it. Again, Harari's point of view is that behind every revolution and leap lies the great suffering of individual human beings, and this time is no exception. In 2016, Harari extended his conclusions in this book when he gave a speech at a university. If a minority of human beings can really use technology to transform their bodies and minds, they can become immortal or have a memory like a computer. Then class inequalities will expand into inequalities among species, and the suffering of most people may be deeper than that in several periods of change in history. As a brief history of mankind concludes, the only thing we can do now is to influence the direction they go. Since we may soon be able to transform our desires too, perhaps the real question to ask is not what do we want to change? What to become, but what do we want to want? If you still take this question lightly, it may be that you really haven't figured it out. This is the end of this episode of the show. What do you think about it differently? Welcome to leave a message to discuss with everyone. Hey, if you like our channel, please subscribe us. Haha, remember to like it.